Welcome to the second episode of BaKhabar, which is a series of thought-provoking, data-driven discussions and conversations on Pakistan's economy, on governance and on politics. So हम लोगों ने last time जो discuss किया था in episode 1 वो इसके पाकिस्तान की मईशत आखिर खड़ी हुई कहाँ पे, किस जगह पे खड़ी हुई है और उसका मवाजना जो है, उसका comparison जो है, actually किन ममालिक के साथ किया जाना चाहिए. And the third and most important, we use that to move into this important discussion कि पाकिस्तान की economy को, we've been promised कि Pakistan will be an Asian tiger, it will be an economic powerhouse. तो वो क्या चीज़ें हैं, वो क्या challenges हैं that have stopped the Pakistani economy from living up to its potential. So one of the important themes that we discussed was कि Pakistan is a predominantly consumption-driven economy. तो जब हमने 1990 या 1991 के लेवल्स देखे तो हमें पता चला कि about 75% of the income was focused on private consumption. And fast forward 20 years from then, almost 20 years from then, we stand at we've grown higher than that. So 85% roughly of your income is now going into private consumption. So है क्या कि you have very little to save. And when you have very little to save, then that has a dampening effect on GDP growth. So these were one of the highlights, and especially when we compare it to Bangladesh, we could see where the problem lies. So what we want to understand today is why are Pakistanis unable to save? क्यों है इतनी consumption? क्यों हम लोग save नहीं कर पाते? क्यों हम लोग invest नहीं कर पाते? So we have Faiz with us again today, and hopefully he'll be able to take us through that.
Thank you for having me here again, Sanin. So this point on saving is important because, like you mentioned, कि हमें पहले as a country save करना है, फिर उस पैसे को invest करना है किसी तरह, just to have future income growth. Right? That's the basic conversation that we had last time. I think today let's talk more about कि पाकिस्तानी save क्यों नहीं कर पाते, right? And from a very basic point of view, if you think कि saving बढ़ेगी कैसे, it would grow in two possible ways, right? एक तो है आप अपनी income बढ़ा दो और कंजम्पशन उतनी रखो तो आपकी सेविंग बढ़ जाएगी, या फिर आप इनकम उतनी रखो और कंजम्पशन कम कर दो आउट ऑफ व्हाटएवर यू आर कंज्यूमिंग, एंड दैट आल्सो हैज लाइक इंप्रूव्स योर सेविंग इन वन वे और अनदर. अब पाकिस्तान के केस में why haven't incomes grown, right? Let's start with that first. My hypothesis is incomes haven't grown because productivity hasn't grown. Productivity हमने last time थोड़ी बहुत बात की थी कि is output per person hasn't grown, and we can talk about industries in a little while, लेकिन मैं overall अभी पहले flow की बात करता हूँ. जब ये इस conversation की बात होती है ना कि आजकल इन्फ्लेशन के दौरान में लोगों ने बात करना शुरू करी है कि रियल इनकम्स इन पाकिस्तान आर गोइंग डाउन. रियल इनकम्स क्या होती हैं? ओवरऑल इनकम जो आपकी नॉमिनल इनकम कहलाती है, व्हिच इज जो आपको एक्चुअली कैश मिलता है एडजस्टेड फॉर इन्फ्लेशन, कि महंगाई कितनी बढ़ी है और उसके हिसाब से आपकी इनकम पे कितना फर्क पड़ा है. तो real incomes basically they say in the last 2-3 years are going down, which is very true. पर इसको अगर थोड़ा time horizon हम increase करें ना, तो हम again ये 1990s की हमने last time बात करी थी, अगर हम जब से देखें तो inflation has gone up by 10x, 10 गुना prices बढ़ चुकी हैं in the country, right? That's an important fact to remember. जिसका अगर आपकी incomes basically 10 गुना से ज़्यादा नहीं बढ़ी होंगी तो you will be worse off. But if you start looking at real personal income, which is basically जो आपके cash आ रहा है adjusted for inflation, that actually gone up by 2.6x. So तकरीबन 2.5 गुना income, real personal income बढ़ चुकी है. So actually you haven't been worse off as compared to inflation. तो थोड़ी बहुत improvement आई है. ये थोड़ी बहुत improvement आती कैसे? Universally ये थोड़ी बहुत improvement जो आती है वो आती है from productivity, as I mentioned. लेकिन अब let's look at the other side, which is productivity कितनी ऊपर गई है. अब productivity is actually increased by around 1.6-1.7x during the same period of time. तो अगर आप actually इस पूरे data को stretch out करें और देखें, people have actually been rewarded more than their productivity, क्योंकि in real personal income terms your income has gone up and productivity hasn't gone up by as much. तो इधर मतलब इस पूरे system में कुछ ना कुछ तो हो रहा है, which is rewarding people more than their work or more than the output they produce, which is kind of weird. तो income के point पे ये मतलब पहला that's the first thing we should be diving into कि ये real personal income ऊपर क्यों जा रही है.
So to understand better, if I'm a business owner, if I have manufacturing setup की हुई है, technically, if you, I am forced now, not forced, but let's say I am paying my people a lot more, but their ability to produce more is a lagger, is still lagging behind. So I'm rewarding them even though their productivities are not being able to match to that level. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, you are. And it's a bit of a controversial statement, so we have to tread carefully. Because I don't know how many business owners actually look at this economic data और वो actually map करते होंगे कि real personal income कितनी ऊपर जा रही है, because real personal income में फिर real wages अलग से आ जाएंगी, बाकी जो सारे components हैं income के वो अलग से आ जाएंगे. So I don't know how many people are doing this, but yes, that fact is true कि आपकी real personal income adjusted for inflation has grown at a faster rate than the productivity of the country itself. One hypothesis could potentially be, and like when you chart it out, you will see a slight jump coming in post 2010. So ये जो अब business owner का बहुत अच्छा example है, because they are mandated by law to pay minimum wage. A minimum wage from 2010 to, अगर हम अभी 2019-2020 देख लें, तो 2010 में होती थी 7,000 रुपए मिनिमम वेज, विच मीन्स अनस्किल्ड लेबर को आपको कम से कम महीने का 7,000 रुपए देना ही देना है. उसके ऊपर अब जो है in 2019 those numbers are at 17,500. 7,000 से 17,500 तक वो अमाउंट गया है मिनिमम वेज का. I don't know if the productivity went up at the same rate, because this is more than doubling of minimum wage, and I'm pretty sure actually that productivity hasn't doubled during that period of time.
So, जो minimum wage की बात करते हैं, it's very interesting. कहने को तो minimum wage is legislated, is mandated, but what in your opinion, कहना बड़ा आसान है on paper, but how many people, how much do you think this is practical and realistic कि minimum wage actually pay की जाती है?
काश मतलब पाकिस्तान का लेबर डेटा और इलेबोरेट होता and I could give you a more definite answer. Again, in conversations I've had, basically first thing to think about is पाकिस्तान की informal economy कितनी है. पाकिस्तान की informal economy is whatever 70% of your labor force is employed informally. I'm talking about non-agricultural workers. तो सबसे पहली चीज तो ये याद रखनी है, रूरल एरियाज में इसका प्रोपोर्शन और ज्यादा है, अराउंड 76-75%, और अर्बन में थोड़ा सा कम होगा, लाइक 68 तक परसेंट ऑफ योर लेबर फोर्स विल बी वर्किंग इन इनफॉर्मल. तो इनफॉर्मल को ट्रैक करना थोड़ा मुश्किल है इन टर्म्स ऑफ उनको मिनिमम वेज मिल रही है कि नहीं मिल रही है. बट आप इनफॉर्मल वर्कर्स का भी पहले एग्जाम्पल ले लें, ठीक है. अब आप कारपेंटर का एग्जाम्पल ले लें या फिर माली गार्डनर का एग्जाम्पल ले लें, राइट. टेक्निकली अनस्किल्ड वर्क, इट इज अ बिट स्किल्ड, बट लेट्स थिंक अबाउट दैट. वो महीने का जो है technically goes to 5-6 houses at a point in time, right? You can say one house individually is not paying him 17,500 रुपए, लेकिन अगर आप उन सबकी अगर आमदनी कंबाइन करें, more often than not you will find that he or she is making more than 17,500 रुपए, right? Again, this is a blanket statement and you can prove me wrong. You do not have the data to support कि minimum wage इधर पे की जा रही है कि नहीं जा रही है, but just it seems like in more cases than not, it would have been paid. The formal sector is something that you can talk about quite well. And remember, the formal sector, जो हम ये manufacturing की बात करते हैं या फिर हम services की बात करते हैं, a lot of that is मतलब formalized. अगर आपने factory खोली हुई है, you have to have registered your workers, etc. और plus checks होते हैं, spot checks, to find out कि आप minimum wage at least pay कर रहे हैं कि नहीं कर रहे. अब minimum wage is maybe you were not paying minimum wage to all of your workers, ठीक है. कुछ सबसेट होगा जिनको आप मिनिमम वेज पे कर रहे हो, बाकियों को उससे ज्यादा पे करना होगा. व्हाट हैपेंस व्हेन यू इंक्रीज मिनिमम वेज फ्रॉम 7,000 to 17,500, ठीक है. मिनिमम वेज वाले तो यस दे आर अर्निंग अ लॉट मोर एंड दैट्स प्रोबब्ली गुड फॉर देम, इट्स देयर फॉर सोशल प्रोटेक्शन, बट एट द सेम टाइम जो उनके ऊपर काम कर रहे हैं उनकी भी इनकम्स प्रोपोर्शनली ऊपर जानी होती है, इफ नॉट मोर देन प्रोपोर्शनली, राइट. सो एक जो ये metric है of increasing minimum wage actually leads to higher wages across the value chain more often than not. Again, people will come back and say कि नहीं ये तो नहीं होता और it's there for a specific reason, but just think about it like logically, and in conversations I've confirmed this with a lot of industrialists as well, कि जब minimum wage ऊपर जाती है हमें बाकी वर्कर्स को भी ज्यादा पैसे देने पड़ते हैं, राइट? एंड दिस इज सो why I want to focus on productivity is because linking back to our saving point कि हमें saving increase करने के लिए actually real GDP improve करनी पड़ेगी, real incomes improve करनी पड़ेंगी, right? And that hasn't been the case in Pakistan for the longest time. अगर हम across sectors देखना शुरू करें, agriculture, which is your largest employer in the country, productivity has barely changed, and I can give you a few yields and define that in a little while as well. Across industries, maybe apart from like the heavy services industry like finance and insurance and all of these white collar jobs, productivity और कहीं marginally improve नहीं हुई है. And this is, I'm looking at a very long term horizon. पिछले 5 साल देख लें, पिछले 10 साल देख लें, पिछले 20 साल देख लें, it hasn't changed much. In agriculture particularly, agriculture में सबसे जरूरी पाकिस्तान में है livestock और crops. Like think about that. There are other things as well. Fisheries भी आती हैं, but let's focus on that. Contrary to popular belief, actually, livestock is the most important factor in agriculture. मुझे हमेशा से लगता था, again, urban dweller, no idea about agriculture, के crops होंगी because that's what you see the most of. Crops में wheat is our let's say सबसे ज़्यादा land allocation हम जो करते हैं वो wheat growing को करते हैं in the country, but livestock is actually what drives the growth in agriculture the most. तो इसकी अगर हम productivity देखें, and that has been practically unchanged. Maybe it's changed by 10% in the last 20-30 years. ठीक है? Why that is the case is because हमने modernization ही नहीं करी है farming में. ठीक है? हमारी yields जो है, जो हम seeds use करते हैं या फिर हम जो उसके ऊपर fertilizer use करते हैं, like there's a lot of articles on Macro Pakistani on this because ये एक topic था जो मुझे समझ में आके नहीं दे रहा था. बचपन से हम पढ़ते आ रहे हैं कि जब ज्योग्राफी में पढ़ते थे कि हम अग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी है. अगर हम अग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी है, हम उसके एक्सपर्ट्स क्यों नहीं है, राइट? इफ वीव बीन डूइंग एग्रीकल्चर फॉर सो लॉन्ग, इफ वीव हमारी इतनी सिग्निफिकेंट पोर्शन ऑफ आवर लेबर फोर्स इज एम्प्लॉयड देयर, क्यों नहीं होता? इट्स अगेन लिंक्ड बैक टू कि इसमें सीड रिसर्च फॉर एग्जांपल सही तरीके से नहीं हुई हुई. जो हम फर्टिलाइजर एप्लीकेशन कर रहे हैं, यू गेट इनटू दैट. हम लोग एंग्रो यूरिया बचपन से बहुत सुनते आ रहे थे. यूरिया इज ऑल नाइट्रोजन. व्हाई नाइट्रोजन इज गुड, एंड मे बी वी कैन डू अ डिटेल्ड कॉन्वर्सेशन ऑन दिस लेटर, इज कि वो पत्तों को हरा कर देता है. अब वो हरियाली इज समथिंग दैट द फार्मर्स लुक एट एंड थिंक, ओके हरियाली इज ग्रेट, बट हमें एक्चुअली और किस्म के फर्टिलाइजर भी चाहिए टू एड टू द न्यूट्रिएंट्स ऑफ द वो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल लाइक पोटैश, फॉस्फोरस, बाकी जो आने हैं फर्टिलाइजर, वो हम इतने ज्यादा यूज नहीं करते. हम नाइट्रोजन पे over index करते रहते हैं. So that's one reason why your yields are low. When I say yields are low, I mean like it's 30 to 50% of international benchmarks. अगर आप बाकी कंट्रीज में देखें, आपने शुगर केन का बहुत सुना हुआ होगा. हमारी yield, और yield, let me explain that a bit more, is kgs per hectare जो आपने वो प्लांट किया होगा. So आप कितना एरिया एलोकेट कर रहे हो उस क्रॉप को, और उसमें से आउटपुट कितना निकल रहा है, राइट? So in terms of sugarcane, you're somewhere around 60 tons per hectare. आपकी जो yield है, Guatemala, which is, you can't really compare to Guatemala, but let me just give you the best practice, is 121 tons per hectare. So almost, मतलब डबल से भी ज्यादा ही है. ठीक है? अब उन्होंने सोच के रखा हुआ है, साउथ अमेरिका है, हमारे यहाँ बारिश होती है, so it's like rain fed crops, and we are good at producing sugarcane. पाकिस्तान में क्या होता है? शुगर इज important for the country, तो हमें शुगर केन ग्रो करनी है. Obviously there is a lot of rent seeking around that, and maybe at some point in time we discuss that as well. तो हमें बेसिकली हो सकता है शुगर केन ग्रो ही नहीं करनी चाहिए बिकॉज हमारी एक्सपर्टीज नहीं है, लेकिन हम ग्रो करते हैं और हम बिलो पार ग्रो करते हैं, which is bringing down the productivity of the entire sector. Same thing with wheat, you will see, same thing with rice, same thing with maize, which are the important crops that you grow, same thing with cotton, right? And that's important as well. तो एग्रीकल्चर में yields improve नहीं हुई. अब एक और जो सवाल ज्यादातर बोला जाता है, which is अच्छा सही है, हम एग्रीकल्चर में अब क्यों बात करें, हम तो बहुत आगे बढ़ गए हैं. हम सर्विसेज, अब हम देखें, हम IT सर्विसेज एक्सपोर्ट हो रही है हमारी, और रिटेल ट्रेड और ये ट्रांसपोर्ट कितना ऊपर जा रहा है, which is great, but think about how a country should be growing. ठीक है? आप मतलब generally speaking, historically countries were agrarian. ठीक है? सबसिस्टेंस फार्मिंग करते थे, अपने आप को वो खिलाते थे. देन दे मूव्ड ऑन टू इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, फैक्ट्रियां लगाई उन्होंने, वही एग्रीकल्चरल आउटपुट जो है फैक्ट्रियों में गया, वो निकल के फिर बिकना शुरू हुआ. बिका कहाँ से? सर्विसेज में, राइट? सो दैट्स द इंटायर वैल्यू चेन ऑफ एन इकोनॉमी कि आप पहले एग्रीकल्चर पे फोकस करते हो, फिर आप इंडस्ट्री पे फोकस करते हो, फिर आप सर्विसेज पे फोकस करते हो. पाकिस्तान हैपेंड टू मिस दैट स्टेप इन द मिडल कि पाकिस्तान ने क्या किया, एग्रीकल्चर पे फोकस करा और अभी तक करता रहा. इंडस्ट्री पे थोड़ा सा फोकस आया, फिर वो हट गया बिकॉज सर्विसेज बिकेम ऑल ऑफ अ सडन अमेजिंग. व्हाई डिड सर्विसेज बिकम अमेजिंग? क्योंकि हम इम्पोर्ट लेड इकोनॉमी है, लाइक आई डिस्कस लास्ट टाइम. जो आपकी पॉपुलेशन ग्रो हो रही है, यू हैव माउथ्स टू फीड. यू फीड द माउथ्स थ्रू द किरियाना शॉप्स इन विद इन सर्विसेज फॉर एग्जाम्पल. अब उसको अगर जो प्रोडक्ट्स खिलाने हैं वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर से नहीं आ रहे, वो इम्पोर्ट कर लेंगे, right? A lot of your consumption is imported for that reason because you have a lot of requirements that the domestic economy, the domestic industrial sector cannot meet. तो इसलिए अगर हम प्रोडक्टिविटी पे वापस अगर मैं कॉन्वर्सेशन लेकर आऊं, it is great that your services sector is doing really well, but the services sector derives its productivity from the industrial sector. The industrial sector derives its productivity from the agrarian sector for the most part. तो अगर आप सारी वैल्यू चेन की प्रोडक्टिविटी इंप्रूव नहीं करेंगे, आपकी ओवरऑल कंट्री की प्रोडक्टिविटी इंप्रूव नहीं होगी. Hence your real incomes will not go up, and hence eventually you will not be able to save as much.
So what we understood right now is that to increase incomes, you have to focus on productivity. Productivity का अभी, if you have to take a snapshot, challenges क्या हैं, and what could you speak a little bit about across this value chain, across these three sectors? What are some things that come to mind that can possibly increase the productivity across these three sectors? Do we have the right mix right now in terms of services, agriculture, and industry? What should the right mix be? Maybe a little bit about that, and what can be done? You can share some of your thoughts. What can be done to increase productivity across these three sectors?
Great. So maybe before we answer that, ये अपने mix की जो बात करी, so agriculture makes up 20 to 25% of your GDP. जो industrial sector है जिसमें manufacturing आता है, it's roughly 15 to 20%. So agriculture से कम, and the rest is all services. So over 50%, 50 to 60% is all services. This mix, how we should ideally change it at least, is कि हम agriculture पे सही हैं, ठीक है, हम सर्विसेज में ज्यादा हैं. तो सर्विसेज और मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में एक चेंज आना है, वेयर यू स्टार्ट इम्प्रूविंग द लेवल ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन कहलाती है ये, परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी ऑफ इंडस्ट्री. वी इंक्रीज दैट लेट्स से बाय 10% एंड देन यू रिड्यूस सर्विसेज बाय दैट मच, राइट? अगेन इसका मतलब ये नहीं होगा कि आप सर्विसेज कम कर देंगे. इट विल जस्ट मीन कि इंडस्ट्री विल स्टार्ट मेकिंग अप a larger part of your GDP, and that is how the country should grow, with a solid industrial base. The solid industrial base also helps you with exports, which at some point in time we will cover later as well. इसकी प्रोडक्टिविटी इंप्रूव कैसे करनी है, राइट? एंड इट ऑल कम्स बैक टू हम ये सेविंग की बात क्यों कर रहे हैं. हम सेविंग की बात इसलिए कर रहे हैं ताकि हम इन्वेस्टमेंट कर सकें, और इन्वेस्टमेंट हमने लास्ट टाइम बात करी थी किस किस्म की होनी चाहिए, इफिशिएंसी सीकिंग किस्म की, right? Where you try to look for ways to improve the actual productivity of the farmer, let's say. हम agriculture से अगर शुरू करते हैं, you can have better seed research, you can have better soil research. पाकिस्तान में soil research काफ़ी limited है. टेस्टिंग कराना फॉर एग्जांपल सॉइल की, कि उसमें किस किस्म की क्रॉप्स ग्रो हो सकती हैं, डिसाइडिंग अकॉर्डिंगली आपका कंपैरेटिव एडवांटेज किस क्रॉप में है, किस में नहीं है. livestock, which I mentioned is the largest component of agriculture, उसकी productivity improve कैसे कर सकते हैं. The Netherlands में for example productivity is off the charts कभी अगर हम उसकी बात करें, and remember the area that they grow it in, all of their agriculture is the size of Manhattan. I'm bringing in different facts, it's just important to remember these things. बहुत छोटे एरिया में वो productivity they're killing it, the Netherlands. So maybe there is something that you do with the Netherlands, an efficiency seeking partnership, just to find out कि आप agriculture को अपने revamp कैसे कर सकते हैं. Within manufacturing, this is happening काफी हद तक already, as you start investing in the latest technology, improving your output accordingly. आप जो आपके for exports की अगर हम बात करें, your major export is textiles. टेक्सटाइल में हम हायर वैल्यू एडेड गुड्स की तरफ जाएं. अभी हम क्या करते हैं, हम यार्न बेचते हैं, हम कभी knitwear बेचते हैं, बट यू डोंट डू व्हाट बांग्लादेश डज फॉर एग्जांपल, व्हिच इज रेडीमेड गारमेंट्स. एज लीजर का इतना बड़ा वो चला हुआ है आजकल ट्रेंड ग्लोबली, which is not really cotton, it's like synthetic fabric based या synthetic fiber based products which are higher value add. मैं सिर्फ बोल रहा हूँ कि आप value add कैसे बढ़ा सकते हैं so that the same person working maybe is not working faster but he's just working on higher value added products. तो आप उससे अपनी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग की प्रोडक्टिविटी इंप्रूव कर सकते हैं एंड ओवरऑल इंडस्ट्री की भी आप प्रोडक्टिविटी इंप्रूव कर सकेंगे उस तरीके से. All of this will channel into services then. So automatically, to a certain extent, uski productivity increase ho jayegi, and all of this technology stuff that's coming up, and we will have hopefully a detailed session on digital Pakistan at some point in time. So हम services की उसमें बात करेंगे. I think that's a great way of improving productivity at the services level.
So I think थोड़ा सा backlash तो मेरे ख्याल में मैं expect करता हूँ, क्योंकि once you start saying कि you move back, you refocus a little bit on industry, on manufacturing. So you have a group of people popping up and saying कि दुनिया आगे बढ़ रही है, services की तरफ ज़्यादा रुझान है, IT की expose बढ़ रही है, और you're taking us back to the Stone Age. Not actually the Stone Age, but you're taking us back to more primitive years, जिसमें आप बोल रहे हैं कि यार industry पे वापस वो focus करना चाहिए. So I think
I will. Let me just interject in case that backlash does come about. मैं ये बिल्कुल भी नहीं बोल रहा कि सर्विसेज ग्रोथ कम कर दें. हम बोल रहे सर्विसेज ग्रो करें, yes, but manufacturing, your industrial base should be growing at a faster pace than services so that it can take up a larger share of GDP than it does right now. अभी for now, your Pakistan is deindustrializing. आप जहां होते थे, आप उससे what has happened in the last let's say I think 10 years or so, आपकी agriculture output contribution to GDP has gone down by 2% points. Manufacturing and industry also has gone down by 2 percentage points. Services has gone up by 4 percentage points. So अभी basically services ऊपर जाए रह रही है. I'm just saying इसको थोड़ा सा stall करने के लिए let's increase manufacturing as much as possible. Let's increase industry as much as possible. Industry में construction भी आती है by the way. So like maybe in a bit that when we talk about consumption, it will be linked. कि आप construction को भी improve करें. I'm not saying let's not improve construction. But I would over-index on industry because we have left it ignored for a pretty long time.
So, interesting way to segue into the next point is that you spoke about incomes, you spoke about productivity. अब जो तीसरी चीज आ जाती है कि consumption is still extremely high. Why is it high, and how can we possibly bring this down?
Great. Or again, these conversations don't happen as often as they should be, right? कि consumption led growth की तो बहुत बात होती है पाकिस्तान में कि consumption driven economy है, a lot of mouths to feed. But when you start looking at the breakup of consumption के पाकिस्तान में private consumption जो हमने बोला 80% आपकी GDP consumption की है, इसमें what are the buckets that you spend your money on? Obviously there is food, right? And food takes up 35% roughly of your consumption bucket. Okay, this is normal compared to other low middle income countries. आप वियतनाम ले लें, इंडिया ले लें, this is very normal कि आपकी 30-35% of your income has to go on food. In developed countries, yes, that share goes down, but for low middle income countries, it makes sense that you spend a lot of your income on food itself. So non-food consumption is what I'd like to focus on. And if you chart it out again, you will see कि हम पाकिस्तानी जो है ना, अगर हम वियतनाम या इंडिया का एग्जांपल ले लें, we spend twice as much on housing and utilities than the nearest country. Twice as much. मैं कोई percentage points की बात नहीं कर रहा. It's हमारी जो consumption bucket है, उसमें से 30%, 30-31% is housing and utilities, right? In Vietnam, the same number is around 16%. In India, it's 17%. Similar countries, and they are spending half as much on housing and utilities. That has to mean something, right? इतना बड़ा फर्क नहीं होना चाहिए. And I think obviously the number one issue has been the fact that हमारे यहाँ housing की shortage कोई 90s से चलती आ रही है. You start looking at reports and you will see 98 में आई थिंक दे आइडेंटिफाइड कोई 4 मिलियन घरों की शॉर्टेज थी. टुडे द शॉर्टेज इज ओवर 10 मिलियन. ये शॉर्टेज इंक्रीज होती जा रही है, which means demand for housing is going up. Prices for housing, I'm sure everyone has felt, has been going up. और ये कंजम्पशन बास्केट में आपकी इंक्रीज हो जा रहे हैं इसका शेयर, राइट. दूसरी बात, यूटिलिटीज, बिजली के मसले सबने देखे में, अभी भी लेटेस्ट टैरिफ हाइक आई है, and it will keep on coming. We have one of the cheapest electricities in the region, so I'm not saying it's a lot. It's just getting worse. That's the point that I'm trying to make. कि हमारी consumption basket में housing and utilities is too much, which is why something like Naya Pakistan housing scheme is actually a great thing for me, right? And it's not the first time any government is tackling low income housing. PPP ने भी कोशिश करी थी एक ज़माने में. But I guess this is the first time that the whole ecosystem is trying to come together, right? कि आप एक तो आपने स्कीम खोली है, yes, उसमें बहुत रेंट सीकिंग हो रही है, and there are all of these builders doing a bunch of stuff, but we need to focus on what the aim is. The aim is to provide low income housing to people who are spending an outsized amount on housing right now, right? That needs to be solved. अगर आप इसको solve करेंगे मेरे हिसाब से, consumption will automatically as a share of GDP start going down, right? You will invest right now to make sure consumption in the future goes down. You start saving more, hence you will end up investing more, और फिर आप बाकी चीजों पे फोकस कर सकेंगे. अभी फिलहाल जो है, there is no capacity to save in our country. That's basically. Let me stop there and see if you have any questions.
So that's a very interesting point, and we get into that because agar issue hai, and we compared ourselves to Vietnam, we compared ourselves to India, very relevant examples, very accurate comparisons. Yeah, you're standing at almost twice in terms of housing costs and utilities as a group, if you group them together, almost, right? And utilities, then you obviously break it down into electricity, into gas, into water, into XYZ. So we'll get into those in, like, we'll dedicate episodes, complete episodes into getting into electricity, into housing, क्योंकि ये काफी बड़ा मसला है. You can have political point scoring over that, you can have whatever you want, but there are people and there are forces that are working towards that. How successful they are, what the problem is, where do we see Pakistan in the next couple of years, like achieving meaningful progress in those areas. So we'll get into that. This last point that you said, and I understand that people will have a problem, might have a problem understanding this. जब हम बात करते हैं private consumption की, and what is left over is savings, could you briefly explain कि private consumption and savings and how those savings result into investments and then GDP growth? Could you really break that down and explain more, easily to the audience कि ये होता कैसे exactly, so that people have an understanding कि अच्छा इससे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा?
Again, we have kept it simple so far, और हम सिर्फ private consumption की बात कर रहे हैं, और we left it at 80% of your income is spent on consumption. ये हमने अभी तक basically बोला है, but that's actually incorrect. You actually import products and consume that as well, जो कि आपकी GDP में count नहीं होता. Yeah. So your consumption is actually greater than 80% if you think about at a household level. अब ये convert जो आपने ये life cycle की बात करी कि how do you first save and then how do you invest that. तो आपको महीने की आमदनी आ रही है let's say 50,000 रुपए, right? उसमें से according to macro numbers you are spending more than 40,000 rupees on consumption itself. Consumption का मतलब जो हमने सारी चीजें अभी तक डिस्कस करनी है, घर की अखराजात या फिर खाने के अखराजात, जो आपके पास 8-10 हज़ार रुपए बचे हैं, आप उस पैसे के साथ अभी क्या कर रहे हैं, राइट? That channel is also important, but let's get into that in a little while. मैं बोल रहा हूँ ये पहली जो है 8 से 10 हज़ार का अमाउंट जो है, that's actually not the same across the country. आपने हैंड टू माउथ का बहुत सुना हुआ होगा, अर्बन एरियाज, रूरल एरियाज. इफ यू स्टार्ट ब्रेकिंग इट डाउन बाय व्हाट्स कॉल्ड इनकम क्विंटाइल्स. इनकम क्विंटाइल्स का मतलब कि बॉटम 20% कितना इनकम है उनकी और कितनी कंजम्पशन है, वर्सेस द टॉप इनकम क्विंटाइल के टॉप 20% उनकी इनकम कितनी है और उनकी कंजम्पशन कितनी है. इफ यू स्टार्ट लुकिंग एट द नंबर्स यू विल सी कि शुरू के आई वुड से शुरू के 20%, अगले 20%, like let's say the bottom 60% of the country essentially lives hand to mouth, ठीक है, वो ओवर 95% ऑफ देयर इनकम वो कंजम्पशन पे खर्च कर देते हैं. एंड टू बी ऑनेस्ट, द सेविंग एंड द इन्वेस्टमेंट दैट आई हैव बीन टॉकिंग अबाउट is not expected of these bottom 60%, right? No one is expecting कि वो ये लोग save करेंगे और इनकी incomes eventually factory setup करेगी, right? That is not how it globally works as well. Globally, the richest of the countries save the most, and that is channeled into investments. ठीक है, तो that I would rather focus on the saving component in the highest income quintiles of the country because it's more realistic for that to come about. But Pakistan में again I feel bad कि मैं सिर्फ मसले identify करते रहता हूँ और अच्छी बातें नहीं कर रहा. Hopefully we can get into that as well. कि हमारी urban top 20% का अगर हम example ले लें, right? The essentially the richest of the country till about 2014 they used to spend 80% of their income on consumption.
Just to pause you there, Faiz.
Yeah.
When you break Pakistan down into this into quintiles, into groups, 20%, lowest 60% and upper 20%. Could you give the audience a view कि आप जो top 20% में हैं वो किस income level पे आते हैं? Because I think that's a big misunderstanding what people have.
Yeah. So income bracket, again, there are different versions of this, but income bracket, you will be surprised to know, is monthly household income of around 65,000 is the average income of the highest income bracket. So it's pretty low. It's not that high. लेकिन मैं इन्हीं की अभी भी बात कर रहा हूँ. The lowest income quintile by comparison has an average household income of 24,000 at an urban level. So like think about that. At a rural level, it's even lower, around 21,000. But जो मैं जिन अभी bucket की बात कर रहा हूँ, which is highest income earners in urban areas, the average income is around 65,000 and above. First, it's surprising that all of this data is available, by the way. I was very impressed that we're actually tracking all of this household data. If anyone has free time, they should read the Household Integrated Economic Survey. It's a great read. It's eye-opening for a lot of people. Certainly for me, because 65,000 does not sound like the top income earners of the country, but that's how it stands, right? I was going to give you more bad news, which is in 2014, इस income में से, so at that time income used to be around 46,000 actually in 2014, उसमें से 80% consume करते थे, right? Today when it's at 65,000, you actually spend more, 86% of that income. So उनकी saving capacity has actually been going down. Which is फिर हम ये चैनल की तो बात कर सकते हैं कि सेविंग से इन्वेस्टमेंट कैसे जाएगा, बट व्हेन देयर सेविंग इज गोइंग डाउन, दैट्स समथिंग आई थिंक वी नीड टू एड्रेस फर्स्ट बिफोर वी गेट इनटू कि इन सेविंग्स को हम इन्वेस्टमेंट में चैनल कैसे करें.
So just to recap, the cohort, the people, the group that you're expecting to save the most, which will channel back into the country, into savings, into investments, is actually as a percentage consuming more and saving less. Am I getting that right?
Exactly. And that's a function of a few things, right? Unki income basket now veers towards more imported goods. So wo jo consumption thi, unki price increase ho gayi. At the same time, inflation went up significantly, which meant कि उनकी consumption basket की जो cost थी वो went up. हमने शुरू में बात करी थी कि लोगों ने पिछले 2-3 साल में बात करते हैं कि real personal incomes are actually going down, which is true. I just wanted to take a longer view to show you what has happened in the last 30 years. But in the last few years, it hasn't been smooth sailing, even for the richest in the country. And that's something to take away. But let's get into the next question, which is, आपने बोला था saving channel into investment कैसे होना चाहिए. Interesting fact. So अगर in affluent class की बात करें, इस affluent class में एक survey किया था Standard Chartered ने a few years ago, just to find out what are their spending habits in terms of financial technology अगर आप ले लें या financial services पे क्या खर्चे करते हैं वो. And overwhelmingly what they found out is कि 50% of affluent Pakistanis save by storing cash at home. 50% save cash at home. That's how they do saving, right? Compare this to countries like, worst example ले रहा हूँ मैं उस report में, worst example is India at 15%. 50% पाकिस्तान में कैश में सेव कर रहे हैं. इंडिया, विच इज द नेक्स्ट वर्स्ट एग्जाम्पल, इज एट 15%, विच मीन्स हमारे यहाँ कोई aversion है to the formal sector, to like declaring your income, to documenting your income, keeping it in bank accounts, which by the way, as you must know for sure, are providing quite solid returns. आप अपनी stock market को देख लें, मतलब it's up. I haven't checked the numbers right now, but I'm somewhere around 60% since last year. लेकिन ये cash घर पे बैठा हुआ है, right? It's so how do you expect रिचेस्ट की इनकम थोड़ी बहुत कम हो रही है, और जो इनकम कम हो रही है और जो सेव हो रही है, जो सेविंग बच रही है उसके बाद, वो कैश की सूरत में घर पे बैठा हुआ है, लाइक मैट्रेसेस के अंडर है, या जहां पे भी लॉकर्स में पड़ा हुआ है. इट्स क्वाइट सरप्राइजिंग.
I remember 2017 की SCB की रिपोर्ट है, स्टैंडर्ड चार्टर्ड बैंक की रिपोर्ट है. It actually mentioned the word mattress. And I was surprised, and I was also, that's what got my attention as well, because at almost every point, at every standard, you were standing at the last. कि सबसे ज़्यादा cash, and it amuses me because आपके banking products पे returns हैं, your stock market is doing really well, you have avenues available, and you're digitizing, you're doing all the right things. And still people prefer to hold cash. You've mentioned some of the points, maybe because it's documentation, people don't want to declare their income, people don't want it to be public. Maybe there's other angles to that, but yeah, predominantly people have chosen to keep it under, in these exact words, their mattress.
और अगेन इसमें एक और जो मैं पॉइंट ऐड करूंगा, रिमेंबर ये पूरे पाकिस्तान की बात नहीं कर रहा. आई एम श्योर द नंबर इज वर्स फॉर ओवरऑल पाकिस्तान. आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द इमर्जिंग अफ्लुएंट ऑफ द कंट्री, जो कि ये कैश स्टोर कर रहे हैं. इन अदर कंट्रीज टिपिकली दे सेव इन डिपॉजिट्स एट द बैंक, या फिर सेविंग अकाउंट अगर खोल दिया, टाइम डिपॉजिट खोल दिया, जिसमें वो इनकम अर्न कर रहे हैं, एंड दैट इनकम ऑल्सो चैनल्स इनटू इनकम ग्रोथ इन द फ्यूचर, which means they can possibly save more in the future, like if you put the entire thing together. Another thing is technology, right? तो इसी सर्वे में जो, so if you must have read the survey as well, कि अगर आप, उसमें काफी clearly लिखा हुआ था कि if you frequently use digital services, जो tools हैं, if you start using them, you save 8% more than someone who doesn't. बड़ा simple fact है कि आप if you use more digital, you will save more. Right? Pakistan में the use of digital services is again the least out of all comparable countries. अब मैं again China से compare करना तो इतना फायदा नहीं है. 10% of emerging affluent Pakistanis save using digital tools or use digital tools at all. India में same number is 43%. ठीक है, तो आप 10%, वो 43%. So it's just at every metric that you start looking at, it just seems के there is a love for informality in the country. There is a love for cash in the country. Even आपने अगर latest reports देखनी शुरू करी हो स्टेट बैंक की, there is a bit of talk about e-banking going up quite a lot, which is fantastic, right? Electronic banking going up in Pakistan, nothing can be better. But understand कि e-banking में भी क्या आता है, like what is the component of e-banking, which is super important. ठीक है, उसमें e-banking में आती है all the financial technology stuff which you probably already know about, which is internet banking, mobile banking, POS machines हो गई जो आपके अगर शॉप पे जाते हैं और कार्ड स्वाइप करते हैं, e-commerce हो गई, वो हो गई. But yeah, so then but the two biggest are still branches and ATMs. ठीक है, अब ब्रांच पे जो ट्रांजैक्शन हो रही है, मोस्ट ऑफ दैट इज कैश बेस्ड. आप उधर जाके ट्रांसफर करते हैं, आप कैश डिपॉजिट करते हैं, कैश विड्रॉ करते हैं, कैश बेस्ड. एटीएम का सबसे पाकिस्तान में बेसिक मकसद जो है वो कैश विड्रॉ करना है. सो ऑल ऑफ दिस इज व्हाट्स कॉल्ड पेपर बेस्ड ट्रांजैक्शन. तो ई बैंकिंग के अंदर भी तकरीबन 70% of all transactions within electronic banking are actually not digital. They are paper based transactions. So amazing that e-banking is going up in the country. Amazing that they're starting to adopt a few digital tools. लेकिन truly digital आप अभी भी नहीं है, right? Unless you are truly digital, let's say the financial technology, specifically like the company that you work for as well. If penetration of those things don't start going up, आप उस saving को investment में convert करना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा. जब वो नहीं कर पाएंगे तो फिर वही होगा जो अभी तक पाकिस्तान में होता रहता है. ये कैश पड़ा हुआ होता है, ये कैश फिर जाता है रियल एस्टेट में प्लॉट्स खरीदने के लिए, या फिर जाता है ये गोल्ड बार्स खरीदने में. This informal saving, cash based saving will hardly translate into investment in productive assets, and that is an issue that pertains to the richest of the country. Remember that. मैं बार बार repeat कर रहा हूँ ये कि कोई offend ना हो जाए. That is basically the big problem in terms of converting the limited savings you have in the country to investments eventually. तो हाँ, बहुत अच्छी बात है, हम बात करेंगे सेविंग बढ़ाएं, इनकम्स बढ़ाने के थ्रू या कंजम्पशन कम करने के थ्रू, बट दैट चैनल फॉर सेविंग टू इन्वेस्टमेंट आल्सो नीड्स टू बी हेवीली वर्कड ऑन.
So, and I'll probably this will be my final point, so I'd like to end on this, is that now you have the affluent, the rich, जिनको हम देख रहे हैं कि you need to incentivize them to save more, consume less, whatever. So there's two points of attack for this. There is the individual point of attack, like how should individuals these individuals be incentivized? And what can the government or state-run entities do to bring the system into a position where there's a high level of savings and savings are channelized into productive assets?
Okay, but again, let's break that down into two, right? Which is, पहले तो आपको savings बढ़ानी है, which is everything that we've spoken about over here. I think the current government is actually doing a bit. I wouldn't want to criticize it as much. There is a focus on textile, for example. There is a focus on export for now. There is a focus on the Naya Pakistan housing scheme. There is a bunch of stuff that they're doing, which is pretty good. The SECP, like we mentioned last time, is doing a lot on ease of doing business. State Bank is actually trying to do a lot on improving the use of digital financial technology. So in terms of regulations, in terms of lawmaking, I think we have started coming on the right track. तो वो income उस तरह improve हो जाएगी और consumption उस तरह कम हो जाएगी. How I would suggest we start looking at converting the existing savings at least into proper investments, into productive investments, is through financial literacy. Right? Agar aap financial literacy with conversations like these is also important. So I don't have the numbers at hand right now, but I remember S&P has done a global literacy ki survey karte hain wo. Pakistan mein, again, like all of these surveys unfortunately rank Pakistan towards the lower end, or 25-26% आपकी financial literacy थी, right? If I remember correctly, less than 15% or 15% were saving for retirement. Pensions की बात हो जाएगी at some point in time as well. I think you need to have deeper capital markets, and you deepen capital markets through, or capital markets, when I say capital markets, I mean stocks, bonds, जो आपकी पूरी financial institution है in the country. इसको आप रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स के थ्रू डीपन बहुत कर सकते हैं, राइट? राइट नाउ 0.13%, if I'm not wrong, of adult Pakistanis invest in stocks, which is a problem for you, which I think you might have a better idea of how to improve. But in my macro personal opinion, it's...
Yeah, so 200,000, 250,000 UINs on paper. The actual participation in markets is nothing to speak about. So ये तो हम लोगों खुद को भी when we started off Investors Lounge, this was a learning for us as well, कि the quoted figure versus the actual participation, the actual volumes, the actual number of people involved in the market, and the depth of retail participation is far from where we should be. Comparable countries. You're not comparable to Bangladesh. Bangladesh, I think, has in excess of 2 million or so investors. Anyway, you compare yourself with Sri Lanka, which is a tiny country, right? Sri Lanka has more retail investors. Bangladesh has more retail investors. India, obviously, in terms of population, you can't be comparing them. In terms of percentages, I think we are the lowest amongst all of these percentage countries. I think you hit the right figure, 0.1 or 0.13%. You should be at the very least at 1%. I'm not even talking about USA, which is probably 50 to 60% of the
60%.
population.
It is at 60%.
It's insane. It's insane where we are standing.
Yeah, but I think there is improvement though. Like to end on a happy note, and this is not me praising macro or praising Investor Lounge over here, but the kind of content that I see on social media, which is educational now. State Bank ने भी एक web app निकाली है, by the way. I don't know if you've checked that out, for improving financial literacy. The kind of DMs I get, direct messages on social media is also like I am very surprised at like people are actually engaged. People are thinking about how to save more or invest करनी है तो कहाँ करें. WhatsApp groups, which are pretty famous in Pakistan, are all buzzing with conversations like these कि कहाँ पैसा डालना चाहिए, क्या invest करना चाहिए. Maybe real estate की ज़्यादा बात हो रही है आजकल जितनी नहीं होनी चाहिए. But still, I think we are moving towards a space where people are becoming a lot more aware, and hopefully it's just part of the progress the country has to make to move towards more digital, more saving, more investment in the future. And yeah, let's explore more topics in the future like this.
And that's why I think both of us are so excited about what we've started. The conversations around financial literacy is happening at the regulator level, as well as these private small companies, the startups are doing their best, whether or not they see monetization and revenue coming in from these or not. They just do it for the purpose that this group of people have to increase. Our families should be able to benefit from good investment planning, from good financial planning. The conversations around budgeting, about savings, about using financial investments to prepare and to secure your financial future. That conversation needs to happen a lot more. It needs to happen in colleges. It definitely happens in some broken form at Chotu Chaiwala and Chai Diwali. I hope people are taking care of what they're putting forward in terms of financial advice. We're very careful of that. But yes, colleges, universities, online, and encourage people to consume as much as information and content as possible, because you can make a massive difference in your family's future based on the small changes and adjustments that you can make today. This is already a big thing in developed countries. And in countries like ours, I think it'll make a massive difference. Thank you, Faiz. Thank you for summing this up. We've spoken about incomes, we've spoken about productivity, we've spoken about consumption, why Pakistanis have not been able to save, and how is that reflected in our investments, what the role of technology is right now, what is being done, and what are we looking at, staring at right now. Thank you for sharing your thoughts today. We will, as for the audience, we will try and do dedicated episodes on all of these topics, because there's a lot to unpack here. सिर्फ utilities में अगर हम बिजली की बात करें, गैस की बात करें, you, me, all of us don't know most of the story. So there's very little that we actually know. There's a lot that we don't know about the story, and understand that will allow you to make a difference in your lives. So with that parting note, until next time, see you and see you very soon. Thank you, Faiz, for being with us today. And
Thank you.
look forward to the next conversation.